Welcome on my first step ever. This is a podcast where we bring in people who have stories worth sharing. Now everyone has a story worth sharing. So why are we, kind of going behind those people, going behind those stories that can teach us that how to build conviction and take actionable steps, because that is the way you realize your goals. Having conviction and actually taking actions is something that will definitely take you towards your goals. But sometime, down the line, we do, we lose the sight of things, and we don't feel connected to who we are, and or we are extremely confused. But what is that keeps one really aligned with what they want to do? And at times it takes many goals, it takes many trials, and it takes many failures and many sleepless nights and many nights where you cry all by yourself to actually get there where you really want. We get super real in these chats because our guest speakers are simply here to give you the best of what they have learned, whether it's been their ups or their downs, and they are very happy to do that. So I would really love to thank our guest speaker for today, who has shown up like a magical figure, and because his story is going to be a really eye-opening story for a lot of us who's gonna listen to him. And he's a very young fellow, so I know a lot of you are going to relate with him as well in his thoughts, with his age, and a lot of other things. So please join me in welcoming Isaac Busch all the way from Australia. Hi Isaac, welcome on my first step ever.
Thank you for having me. It's I have to say, usually a lot of the podcasts I do aren't virtual. This is one of my first virtual podcasts. I do a lot of face-to-face content. So, but thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for the audience for listening.
So that I am extremely happy that this is your debut on the virtual podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm confident that we're going to make the most of this.
Definitely, 100%.
All right, before we dive into this, I'm going to give a bit of a sneak peek about who you really are, but we will get into how you really made yourself to who you are today. So, inspired at 16, and he was feeling lost. He turned his passion of martial arts into becoming a world champion and opening a school at 16, where he mentored over 250 kids weekly. Wow, that is some confidence. Wow, this journey inspired him to start his own foundation, which is Futuready Australia, 2 years later, and helping youth develop practical career skills. Now he runs true thriving businesses and hosts the Outcast Podcast. Sounds very interesting. And speaks to students weekly, empowering both adults and children to reach their full career potential. Wow, we have, I think, an enigma in a house today, I would say. So let's get down to, the very beginnings of Isaac for us. We want to know that where did you grow up? What were the kind of people you were surrounded with and the mindset that you grew up with?
Yeah, definitely. No, I was very fortunate when I was young. I grew up in Sydney, Australia. We grew up in a place called Box Hill. So if anyone's listening and somewhat lives in Sydney, you'll know where Box Hill is. I grew up in a very fortunate place. I went to an all-boys private school over here in Sydney, Australia. Had very good parents who supported me with everything I did. They got me into martial arts when I was really young. I got into Taekwondo when I was 3, and then got into a bit of kickboxing and jiu-jitsu later on when I was about 16. And whilst I was growing up, things were, for me, pretty easy compared to what a lot of people went through, especially when COVID came along and hit a lot of people. I was pretty secure during all those times, and that's something I was very fortunate for. But like I said, I was really young when I started doing martial arts and started getting into different things. My parents had always pushed me to start working really young. So I got my first job when I was just turned 13. I just turned 13. I got my first job. I worked at Woolworths, which is like a major supermarket chain over here. So like a Walmart in the US or something similar to that. And I worked there for a few years, and then I ended up getting fired when I was 16. COVID hit, and we didn't decide to get vaccinated that year. So we ended up getting fired. Myself and a few of my mates, as well as my parents, ended up losing their jobs. And so then we had to pivot and change. And so rather than wasting my time just sitting on my butt, waiting till I graduate school and doing nothing, I was like, okay, let's find something that I was really passionate about. And at the time I had already been doing martial arts for however long. I'd already gone over to the States. So I'd competed for so long. I'd been
Incredible.
teaching at my dojo where I train and still train for 4 or 5 years prior to then. And so rather than wasting my time not doing anything, I decided to follow something I was really passionate about and just something I enjoy. And
Yeah.
at first, there was a conflict, and there's usually this inner conflict between young people in general, and that is where I was working at Woolworths, I was getting paid a lot more. I was getting paid a lot more, and I was really happy with the money that was coming in. And I'd saved up a lot of money to get a car, and I just bought my car, so I was
Congratulations.
really happy. And then, all that went out the window, and I had to completely pivot. And so when I started doing martial arts, I was earning peanuts, right? Like,
Well,
well, what was peanuts for me back then, right? Like, it was really, really small.
yep.
And that was something that I really struggled with, because coming from somewhere where it was so secure, like I said, I grew up in a really secure family. There weren't really that many struggles. I didn't have that many issues. To then be just chucked in the deep end and kind of been left, I can't do anything because mum and dad can't really do anything because they're in the same situation. And
Yeah.
so then 16 opened my first school, and that was just a
Amazing.
really small school. Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to the journey from your 16 because that's a very special journey. We're going to focus all in that. Before that, I want to kind of, go back to your, early childhood days, as you're mentioning. And I think it's pretty okay to not really have a lot of struggles, as I think this has become like a big thing, that everyone needs to have some sort of struggle to be something.
Oh no, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel everyone on their own level, they do face a lot of challenges while you're growing up. So I'm sure you had your own different sets of challenges, or maybe not, which is also fine. What I would really like in your journey so far up till 16 is that you started martial arts and then taekwondo at the age of 3. That's when you started. Oh my god, that is like really really early in anyone's
Yeah.
life, I would say. Which means it was usually driven by something that maybe your parents must have seen in you, the talent that you had, and they wanted to channelize that, which is extremely amazing. But as you're growing up, when you maybe like you're 10 years old or you're 11 years old, our own mind starts working, and we are
Yeah.
like, why do we want to do something that someone told us? Did you ever really face that kind of a challenge while you were growing up? I really want to kind of have an understanding, like, or you were also with it, with you knew that this is what you're good at, so you were like, okay, fine, I love this, I can keep going on. What were you going through at that point in time?
Okay, yeah, for sure. So when I originally started, it was quite funny because Dad continuously tells me the story about how he was this amazing guy that ended up getting me into my now career. Because we ended up driving past a martial arts school, and apparently I was like, "Oh yeah, Dad, I want to do that. I want to do that." And so then he took me there and did it. But when I was probably about 9 or 10, I actually started having, and this happens with all kids, they start disliking the things that they've been doing for a while, whether it's, you get your children that don't want to play soccer anymore because they're just, it's like, Dad, I don't want to go to training today. Dad, it's too cold in the morning. I don't want to get up. And that's the kind of age where I started hitting. And for martial arts, at least, everything started to just go down the drain a bit. I stopped competing for 6 or 7 years because I just couldn't be bothered, basically. I would complain every second day about going to training. Dad, no, I don't really want to go. But Mum and Dad always said I need to keep training till I was 18. And I'm so thankful for that, because by the time I was about 13 or 14, I didn't want to get out there. Like, if you ask them today, it's impossible. If you said, Isaac, you can't go to training today, I'd probably have a breakdown. So yeah, like, there were times, especially when I was young, where A, I didn't have the motivation to do it, or B, I just couldn't be bothered. And my support network were the ones that pushed me to do that and pushed me to keep going. And that's what I always say to my students who participate in Futuready. Like, your network is everything, and the people you know and who you're surrounded by is everything. And I'm pretty sure you've experienced that yourself, or with other people that have been on the podcast, that depending on the people that you have around you, that's going to determine the level of success that you have. And a lot of people, especially I do a lot of work with youth development and a lot of work with the homeless. And so many young people, so many even adults believe that the people you know and the person that you are is kind of set in stone.
Mm.
And only when you actually start opening those doors where you say, hey, well, you know what, come to a business meeting with me and like meet this $1 million CEO, or like come to a business meeting and meet this, you know, person who runs a small business, do they then start to kind of understand what's going on.
This is incredible, and you're absolutely right over there. You know that while you are growing up and around that age, when you start thinking of your own, you you have this. Everyone has this. You know, I think I would say, let's say, the monkey mind, or you know that you want to do something else that you have not done before, and you're like, why do I need to keep doing certain things? And one thing that I really liked about your response to the situation, Isaac, was that you said, okay, I will give myself time until this age and then I'll not do it. So I think giving time is something that worked in your favor, because you realized going forward that, oh no, this is what I'm actually good at and really enjoy. I mean, if you would have just given up at that point in time, in the frenzy of, you know, making that decision, "Oh, I really don't want to do this," and you're done. So I think it's more about thinking through things and giving things time, that probably you might have realized, oh, you really don't want to do this, but it turned out that you really did want to do that, and
Exactly.
you did give yourself that time. So very, very interesting. Now I want to ask you something. A second thing that you mentioned was that your parents helped you, or kind of they helped you understand that it's very important to get into workforce really early on.
Yeah.
Where did that thinking come from your parents, and why did they feel that? And I can definitely vouch that must have really been helpful getting into
Yeah.
workforce really early on.
Yeah.
But how did that come about for you personally?
Sure. Yeah. So for in terms of where it came from along the family line, I definitely think it came from mum's side, because mum always grew up with a family where they were quite strict. They, you know, mum was very financially inclined, I guess. Not,
Amazing.
you know, their family wasn't rich, but mum was already financially aware and financially
Yeah.
smart, and she understood that by starting work as soon as possibly can, getting in there, just earning a bit of money, was going to set me up pretty well. And then once doing that, I remember, you know, my first few days of work, I was like, okay, I'm loving it. It's great. And then after about after a year, I was kind of starting to get a bit bored. You know, I was starting to lose my, you know, enthusiasm that I came in with. You know, oh great, I'm packing the shelves. You know, like I'm wearing a uniform now, and it started to slow down a bit. And that's where the dedication started coming in. Where mum would say to me, you know, Isaac, like the reason you're starting to work is because you need to earn money to do this and do that and do this. And the really funny thing is, a lot of people finish college, they finish university, and then they go do a job, and then they usually use that information for that job to
Yeah.
support their next job. But what's really funny now is almost all of that I've had, all that, you know, the contacts I grew up there, all the experience that I had packing shelves, or so to speak, I didn't end up using. But what I did use the most was social skills that I learned there, and more importantly, what I didn't like. And that's what a lot of people don't really
Very important.
realize. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that when you go try something new, whether it's, you know, at work, whether it's sport, you're not just analyzing what you do like, you're analyzing what you really don't like to do, and then so you don't repeat it again. But what we tend to find is, whether it's in the workforce or whether it's with students in university or college, what they tend to find is they say, oh no, you know, I really dislike studying at school, but I did enjoy the social aspect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to university where you're predominantly studying, and I'm just going to do it for the social aspect, where there's a million other ways to be social. You can go to a club, you can you know, work in a really good team environment. And so yeah, that's what I tend to find happens a lot, especially with youth, that we tend to just focus on the positives, you know, ripping out the positives out of work rather than focusing on the negatives. And whilst I think that's just how society's moving today, they expect us to have a positive mindset focus, right? Like we should just be focusing on the positives. I think highlighting those negatives and really figuring out, you know, what didn't you like about it will really help you. Because if you can start going through every single stage of your life, whether it's, you know, your relationships, whether it's your career, whether it's your physical health, and you point out all the sectors that you just really, really dislike, then we just know not to follow them later on. And then that's going to solve so many issues later down the path, especially in business. I could not tell you how many times something has gone wrong and I've been like, okay, thank you, never touching that again. And so, yeah, all those little things and just pointing out the negatives are really what's going to give you, the heads up.
I love this, Isaac, that you got the understanding of what you really don't like and what being patient and being dedicated is all about. And it's absolutely true, until and unless you actually explore things, you do it by your own self, you really don't understand that what works for you as a person. It
Exactly.
may work for someone else, it may not work for you. So I'm really happy that you got a very good guidance very early on. And for all our listeners who think that they're past that age, and what if they did not have anything around that time and they don't know that what they like, what they don't like, it's fine. I think it's okay. You can relax. Isaac, I like to kind of bring everyone back to this chat, because over here we have covered certain aspects of your very early life, and I like to tell our listeners that these are the conversations where you can pick things from and start working from the point in where you are in your life. These are the learnings. And Isaac, I would love you to, now take us through the time when you reach when you were 16 years old, you were fired, and you realize that now you really need to do something about this. But what I want to ask is that, yes, you are good at martial arts. You're really good at martial arts. You've been doing that particular thing from the past over a decade now. You've got the skill. You're expert at that. You already teach a lot of students, I think, by that time, I guess,
Yeah.
if I'm not wrong. But having your own business is a different ball game altogether. How did that idea come to your head at that point in
Okay,
time?
for sure. Yeah. So that was actually one of the toughest things to kind of start, because at the time I was teaching, I don't know, 3 classes a week. It wasn't that much. It was 3 classes. Each class goes for 45 minutes a week. I was doing a range of things. So I was teaching weapons in one class. I was doing contact sparring in another. And I was doing like cardle forms in another. And so I was doing a really large range of things. And I was getting paid decent. It wasn't as much as I'd be hoping for. It wasn't enough to be sustainable, but it was enough at that age to, save up money, buy a nice car, and just enjoy life, basically. And when I was kind of transitioning from that, I remember going up to my master and I was like, he's known me since 3, so he's very close to being my father. Like that's how close we are. And so I remember going up to him and I said, "Sir, like I just got fired from my job and I need something to do. Like I even if it's I'll scrub the mats for you. Like I just need something to, first of all, keep me busy, and then second of all, give me a bit of pocket money to use up." And so he was like, "Okay, great. Like I'll get you to run the minis program." And our minis program is for students that are 6 years and under. So like all the really, really young students, the ones that cry like at school, the ones that throw tantrums, the ones that like
The
go to
most difficult lot.
yeah, the most difficult lot he gives to me. And I'm like, okay, great. And I already had a bit of experience with them, because at that time I was already third degree black belt. So for our first 3 degrees, we've already
Wow.
had to teach. And so when he gave me that opportunity, I kind of jumped head first and I was like, great, it's going to be amazing. And so went in, and I have to say, for any teachers out there, anyone that's like getting into education, if you can teach the young ones, you can teach anyone. If you can teach a 6-year-old how to clap their hands properly, you'll be able to teach a 40-year-old the physics behind nuclear fusion.
Love it.
So like, that's in my experience at least, and that's replicated through absolutely everything I've done with Futuready, everything that I've done with martial arts, all came from that basis that when I was 16 or 15, I was teaching 6-year-olds. And then once that kind of developed, and as I said, I was doing about 3 classes a week at the time. I was still running the minis program. I was the head of the instructor program, so it was my job to basically recruit other young people who were younger than me and say, look, we want you to come learn how to teach. And I would teach them how to instruct, and we would have educators come in. We would have like high school teachers come in, and I would do a teaching seminar with them. And we actually had, it escapes my mind what the exact title was, but basically she was an educator, and she spends a lot of her time running seminars with teachers and, instructing them how to be positive and making sure students do their best. And I remember she came in and she watched one of my classes. I've never had my heart racing so much in my life. She had like notebook and pen, and she's like writing stuff, and I'm freaking out a bit. And then afterwards she comes up to me and she's like, Isaac, we train teachers to do what you just did in 18-hour, over the span of 18 hours, and they can't even do it as effective as you can. And then so what we then started doing is we started pairing up with them, and we started having, teachers come in and watch how we teach. And we started going through about how, we call it praise, correct, praise. So you praise a student first, then you correct them. And then even if they don't do right next time, you praise them because it encourages them. And so, and so after that, started getting into that. And then after that, I was kind of at the stage where I was like, okay, look, I'm doing everything already. I'm teaching this many classes a week. I'm working with teachers already. I have a pretty good foundation at school. I'm not struggling with my grades or anything. So let's jump into it. And so then when everything happened at 16, I was like, boom, perfect opportunity. And I didn't start in the middle of nowhere. I actually went to my school and I was like, okay, look, I want to run an after school martial arts program. And they're like, oh, okay. And they've done it before. And for whatever reason, they closed it down. They're like, yeah, sweet. And so I think my first class I had 16 students or something like that. And they're paying.
That's good.
16 students and they're paying like $10 a class or something. And
that's still good.
No, it's good. And that class, that I still go every Friday. I still go over to my school and I still teach that program. And that's one of my favorite programs to go back and teach, because you get to go back and relive life. But like that was the beginning of everything. That was the beginning of, that one school is what supported me opening up my next school. And that school is what now supporting my next school, which is opening up very soon. And so, like we were saying before we started pressing record on the podcast, getting started is the hardest thing for everything. I do a lot of social media content, and I speak to a lot of students. I had a lunch the other day with actually a dinner with a student, and he was telling me about how he wants to run a startup. He's in year 10 and he's thinking about this stuff and he's networking like crazy. And I'm like, man, this is great. You're amazing. And just saying, yeah, I'm just planning everything out for my social media and then I'll start. And the bit of advice I gave him, I said, man, like, don't plan it out. Just jump straight into it, because so many people waste their time planning. I can say now, I spent probably 4 weeks more, probably close to 2 months, writing up a business plan for Future and UTF, my martial arts company. And almost all of it went out the window within the first day. And yes, and like, obviously you need to have a clear vision of where you're going. You need to kind of end up where you're going. But I do think a lot of people overthink and overplan. And because of that, they don't become adaptable enough, and they don't start to make changes, and they don't start to become malleable. And what they don't focus on is they focus on the company rather than the skills they're learning. We hear it from, I'm not sure, have you heard of Alex Hermosi? Big.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Alex always speaks about how, you're not crafting your business, you're crafting the skills, you're crafting the person. So if it all goes to shambles, you can pick it all back up and restart, right?
Yeah. I think very perfectly mentioned over here at this point in time about skills, Isaac. I was actually coming to that or going to move forward, but I wanted to kind of reflect over here, and for my listeners also who are with us so far, the ones watching us, that if you have noticed that Isaac did not just start off just from nowhere, as he mentioned. It was not like one day he's like, let me start my own business, and like I think you did not have very ridiculous ideas about how, okay, this is what I'm going to achieve, these many people I want to have. It all started off with what you have at that point in time and with what you can get to do, starting small or starting with whatever resources you have at that point in time. And even before that, I would say that you had a whole decade long of experience of actually building onto your skills first.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's why I'm saying the point of bringing skills is so important, because when you practice a particular skill for over a decade or something, you actually become an expert, and you are sort of number one, probably globally, I would say that in it. And then you have your own authenticity, your own way of teaching that, imparting those teaching to other people. That what makes it unique, and then it kind of creates something of value. So that I can see that. I mean, this is how I see your journey from my point of view, from where I can hear. So as you were slowly, steadily stepping into the entrepreneur journey, you were already there teaching. I'm very, very interested to kind of also understand it's about your entrepreneurship journey, your business journey.
Yeah, sure.
If you could just take us through your business journey, that what are you doing at present? What is the future for you looks like for you?
Yeah.
And yeah, if you can just give our listeners the top three challenges that they could face as a very young entrepreneur, because
Okay.
you are one of them.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start off with what I'm currently doing now and how we kind of got there. So once opening my school when I was 16, I graduated from school, and I always knew I didn't want to go to university or college or anything, just because, first of all, if you get a scholarship, go for it. Amazing. I could have got a scholarship, but I never really found university was for me. And on top of that, the financial burden that came with it didn't really suit me. So as soon as I finished school, basically I founded Futuready whilst I was in school. And the reason for that was because I remember I was sitting at school, and I was sitting with a mate next to me, and we're talking about what we're going to do after school. And I had this whole life plan sorted out at that point. I was like, okay, as soon as I get out of school, apply for ABN here, do this, do this, do this. World Cups here, so get ready for the World Cup. Go over to the US, 2 times a year. Just got back from my second time this year.
Awesome.
I had everything planned out, and he was like, "Man, I have no clue. Like, I'm just going to go to uni and go do a commerce degree." So okay. And then as I kind of got older, and as I hit year 12, I slowly started to realize that so many people do. So many students just jump into whatever. They just jump into a commerce degree. They just jump into whatever, and hope that somehow it leads them to something that they really, really enjoy. And because of that, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to see a lot of my mates go down that path. So what I did is at school, I was like, okay, everyone. Well, I was vice captain at school, so I had somewhat a bit of authority. And I said, boys, lunchtime, you all have to be in it's called atrium. It's basically you just sit there and have a meeting or whatnot. And they all rock up, and they're all sitting there. They're talking. They're like, what's he here to talk about? And my captain, he comes up and he's like, okay, everyone, Isaac's going to talk to you about something today. And I remember getting up there, and my first words were, if you're going to uni, I need to know why. And everyone was like, what? And then I basically had a big lecture with them about how if you're not going to go there for a purpose, then I'll hire you. You can come teach a 6-year-old how to throw a punch, but you just don't go to uni unless you know what you're going to do, because I don't want to see you in the same situation that I've seen a lot of other people being. And then basically after that, a mate of mine came up to me and he's like, Isaac, that was really good. And I was like, oh, thanks. Like I knew I'd been teaching for a while, so that kind of, somewhat correlates. It's like, yeah, that was really good. Like maybe that's something you should think about. Maybe a few months later, I went to a leadership camp and I caught up with a mate that I saw from the previous year's leadership camp. And I was like, man, I want to run this. He's like, sweet, sounds good. Let's do it. And I was like, cool. And so what we ended up doing is we developed a program in collaboration with teachers, educators, some professors that get students to kind of figure out where they want to do, what they want to do. And right now we're working out a program for, we call them graduates. So, it's aimed towards anyone over about 25, 26. And the program basically helps them really find out what they want to do, whether that's in business, with their startups. Because I know so many startups, they're just like, oh, I want to run a business. Oh, great. Like, what do you want to do in that business?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing. So we've been developing a more corporate program that aims at focusing on that. And so Future right now is running really well. We've spoken to over 10,000 students already in the past 10 months. And, it's continuing to grow. we do a lot of, like, as you said at the beginning, we do the Outcast podcast, and we basically get professionals on and we have a chat with them about different questions that students have. And that journey's been absolutely amazing, and I absolutely love it. We've partnered up with a few universities for later this year to get a few seminars in there as well. And then on top of that, UTF is still flourishing. I still have my campus out of my old school. We have a new campus opening up in Kellyville, which is an area near us soon. So if you live in Australia, come check it out. But yeah, so everything's going really, really well. In terms of the three challenges that I think I face most, now I want to address one thing that a lot of people think is a really big challenge, but it's not. And that is, especially for young people your age, like when I went to jump into it, a lot of people thought that I was told a lot, like, Isaac, you're so young, man. Like, forget about the experience side of things. They're like, you just look young. And it's like,
Yeah.
without any facial hair, I'm telling you, I look so young sometimes. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I get you. And then I learned very, very quickly that it just goes all out the door. No one cares. And coming from a person who's in the hardest, what I always remind my mates of is, I'm teaching people who are a year younger than me on how to find a career that is successful. That's the mindset I have, right? And coming from someone who's in that industry, I can tell you now that your age plays very minimal role. If anything, your communication skills, the way you communicate, the way you hold yourself, plays a much larger proportion. And like any of you listeners that are listening that are, 26, if there's any like 40-year-olds, no matter what age you are, it doesn't matter. You can jump into a brand new industry today, and if you know how to articulate yourself correctly, if you know how to hold yourself properly, then you're not going to have a single issue. But I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to go back. The three major issues that I had when I was starting up business. Number one, finance. Not in terms of I didn't have enough. It was that I was reluctant to spend. Because I was always like, if I put the money in and then it doesn't get it back, I'm not going to get it back. And what I learned is by restricting the amount of money and investment you put into your company, you're just restricting yourself. You're just restricting the progress you're going to make. And how I kind of always look at it now is like this. If I put $10,000 into a marketing campaign, for me, that's one or two sales and I get it back. Now, I heard this other rule the other day on Instagram that I thought was amazing. I can't remember who it was from, but it was basically for any type of marketing, any type of investment that you're going to put in, every time you do something, whether it's for your marketing, whether it's for your operation systems, whether it's for, a finance system, that should be at minimum 3 times the amount you're. So if you're selling a $200 course,
Interesting.
You should at least be putting in $600 into your marketing. You should at least be spending $600 on operating systems. You should be at least spending $600 on, if you need it, financial systems. And that rule has applied to me now ever since, I've seen it, and ever since I kind of realized it, even before I saw the reel. So my first issue was I always wanted to hold on to my money. I think that's one thing a lot of people need to realize. If you want to develop, you need, first of all, spend the money on developing your company, your software, your programs, whatever it is, and then later on it will come. So that was my first issue. My second issue was I didn't develop myself as my company progressed. And so what ended up happening is if you can imagine a graph, and I've got companies skyrocketing like this, and I'm kind of staying flat. Like I'm just here. Like for a stage, I'm better than the company. For a stage, like I can reach it. And then at some point, me and the company reach like an intersection where it's like, okay, like this is perfect. It's like this is the amount I can handle, and this is the amount the company is doing. And then anywhere above that, you start to struggle. You start to, not be able to push anymore. You start struggling to delegate. You start running out of ideas. You start not knowing how to handle everything. And so what I've been working on mostly is just self-improvement, whether that's going to the gym, whatever it is. I'm lucky because, I've trained ever since, so I haven't really had to worry about that. But what I have had to worry about is reading a lot more. Even now, I still don't read that much. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I don't read that much. And so for a bit of advice for anyone out there, whether you're doing a startup, whether you're in business, you need to be developing yourself as you go, because not only are companies looking for people who are consistently making sure they're ahead of the game. The top 1% of IT developers aren't people who are using code from 2009. They're people that are using AI to code these massive programs and algorithms now. So, the one bit of advice I'd give is make sure you develop yourself. And the very last struggle that I had is, see, I've had so many, but I want to point out the ones that are most relevant to your listeners. The
That's okay. You
last,
can pick any that you feel like, maybe the recent ones.
yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. So, like, I'll give you an example. One of the most recent challenges that we had is, so, like I said at the beginning of 22, beginning of 22, I met my mate. We're like, let's start a business. Long story short, a few months ago, we started having issues with equity balance, which is a major thing in business. You get into business with a partner, and for whatever reason, they start not working hard, you start not working hard, and then things get uneven, and then people start arguing. Now, we were lucky because we were both very professional about it, and that's one thing I loved about him, and we didn't end on bad terms at all. But one of the biggest struggles that I've had is finding that right business partner and finding the right people to employ. And they always speak about culture. If you're listening to this podcast and you listen to a lot of business podcasts, you would know, like, big CEOs, they always talk about culture, build culture within your business. And we always built this really, really fun vibe culture. If you ever listen to the Outcast podcast, you'll see, like, it's a really fun vibe. Like, oh yeah, great. Like, let's go. We're super here. We're here with blah, blah, blah. And, like, just very similar to your style podcast. And that kind of vibe we wanted to bring to the culture. But once my partner ended up leaving, that kind of went down the drain, because on the podcast, I don't come off as it, purely because, I'm I have a very I can represent myself pretty well, but I was always the stricter kind of person, right? I was always the business minded man. I was always like, okay, like, do we have the money for this? Like, do our operation system support this? And he was always kind of the face of the company. He was always the fun enthusiast. Everyone got, Ethan, like, how are you, man? Like, that's how it would work. And so when he kind of left, all the culture left with it. And so then we had to build all that back up, and I had to build all that back up, and I needed to start changing myself. And that's been one of the biggest issues that we're still having currently, is rebuilding that culture. And when you get into business, you're going to find that there are going to be times where you have to completely shift your culture, because society's changing, because your company preferences are changing. And that's a really, really big task. That's coming from someone that's doing it. It's a nightmare task to do. But once you do it, and if you set it up correctly, that vision, that company ethos can drive people to be so successful. We're getting there slowly, and our presenters now that do a lot of our course presenting are some of the best presenters. They're so motivated, they're so driven to really help these students, and a lot of these people have just graduated recently. 90% of our students graduated last year, 10% have graduated within the past 2 or 3 years. So yeah, they've been my 3 biggest challenges, and kind of how we're slowly overcoming them.
Amazing, Zach. Isaac, first I would say that thank you so much for being so honest, open about the challenges that you are facing. And it really shows that how one really, become what they are as in when they start doing things. It's not about being prepared and being ready to get started with something. You actually become prepared by doing something, and
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
is amazing. Thank you so much, Isaac, for
No,
being
that's
on
okay.
my first step ever. I've thoroughly loved this chat with you, and I think the listeners would have got immensely out of this. I am going to leave the links in the show notes below for Isaac. You want to check out what he's been doing in Australia, who was in Australia, want to check that out in Sydney. And for everyone who was here listening to us globally from all across the places, I would just like to say that these are the kind of conversations which make us realize that this is your own life. When you want to do something, you will do it, but at times it gets difficult, and you need to have that discipline, that momentum to keep going on. And it is also okay to kind of step back take a break, take some rest, and kind of come back again. But pursue what you really want to pursue. Most important is to have conviction. So thank you so much, Isaac, for being on my first step ever. And I always request my guest speakers to leave our listeners with a quote or a saying that they really resonate with.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so I think one of the most recent quotes that I've been focusing on, and I still very keep close to my heart, is that the journey only begins once the bear starts screaming. I don't know if you've ever heard that. That might just be that just might be Australian saying. But in summary, what it means is, well, we don't say bear, we say kangaroo, but we'll just say bear for now. But basically, what it means is if you're currently in a rut, if you're currently not really working that hard, or you're just kind of doing your 9 to 5 pretty normal, and you're not burning, you're not you don't have that drive, you're not pushing yourself, then you need to get in a mindset or a place where you're just ready to roar, whether that's going on a podcast, whether that's ready to rock and roll. Yeah, that's
Love
something I've
it.
been living by.
No, this is very interesting. I've been in Australia for like 5 years now, but this is the first time I'm definitely hearing that. So
Oh, really?
it's good to hear that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm dialing in from Adelaide.
Okay,
So
great.
yeah, that's really interesting to hear that. And thank you so much once again for being on my first step ever. I had such a great time. I think looking at your journey, you're still very young, and you have such a long journey to kind of still travel and discover a lot of things about yourself. But I think what you have really shown us that kind of really building on one skill, being dedicated, and really understanding what you're doing, why you're doing something,
Exactly.
and having the fears that you have, but still going and doing what you really want is it's very, very important. So thank you so much, Isaac, for being on my first step ever. It's been a pleasure to host you.